Welcome into Rounding the Bases.
Round the bases. Everybody knows Joe Goldberg. It's around the bases. Everybody knows Joe Goldberg.
Hey, everybody, welcome into another episode of Rounding the Bases presented by Community America Credit Union, invested in you. We are, if you're listening to this when it comes out, winding down the 2024 calendar year. Who knows? You might be listening to this in 2025 or 26 or 2050. We won't have podcasts then. It'll be something else. I know this much, though. We'll always have fitness. It'll always be important to take care of ourselves. It's a little bit of what my guests will talk about today, although not necessarily. There's so much to dive into. Before I do that, quick shout out to my friends at Chief of Staff Kansas City. If you are looking for a job, if you're looking to hire someone, if you're just looking for a great resource, check them out. Good friends of mine, partners with mine. I love doing work with them. It's just a great partnership of a really good office that believes in people and culture. So whether you're in Kansas City or not, if you want to check them out, please do so. chiefofstaffkc.com, making connections that matter. My connection today comes from a gentleman by the name of Dave Sider, who is a lawyer, a speaker, an author, and much, much more. Someone that I have met through my networking over the years, and he introduced me to today's guest, and that's kind of the way the world works for me. It's all about those connections. So on today's installment of Rounding the Bases, I'm joined by a fitness entrepreneur who has been shaping the personal training industry for 4 decades and counting. His name is Greg Justice, the international best-selling author and owner of AYC Health and Fitness, Kansas City's original personal training center. I think everybody's got a personal training center right now, but where did it start? Over the course of nearly 50,000 sessions, he's built a career on meeting others where they are, making it possible for people of all ages and abilities to make lasting changes towards a more healthy way of living. And I am happy right now to be joined by Greg Justice. Greg, wearing nice Kansas City Royals polo, which I'm sure was just completely coincidental, just as much as him being in a gym right now is coincidental. Greg, how are you?
Hey, Joe, it's great to be here. I'm doing well. Pleasure to be talking with you today.
You know, when I said that something about, this kind of being about fitness, I could do this whole episode and never even bring up fitness and just talk about your entrepreneurial career, which just kept going and going and is still going and going and going. It's just like a never-ending machine, at least from the outside looking in. So much of that has focused on fitness. So much I want to talk about involves the legendary Jack LaLanne, and we'll talk about him, his beautiful widow, the work that you guys are doing. I mean, like I said, it's never ending, but I want to start with this. Take me back to when you began, because the words personal trainer now, private gym, well, however you want to say it, we all know what that is. We all know what that is, whether we do it, we don't do it, we'd like to do it, we should do it. We all know what it is. I don't know if that was the case when you started, was it?
Well, no, when I started in the late 70s, early 80s in fitness, personal training as an industry didn't exist. There were a couple, 3 gyms in town, and personal training just wasn't something that people really knew about. But one day when I was at a church garage sale, I saw this book that caught my eye. And it was 25 cents, so I could afford it. And I bought it. It was called Body by Jake Steinfeld, who is a Hollywood personal trainer. And that book really intrigued me and kind of planted a seed in my mind early on that maybe this is something that could work in the Midwest. But I just kind of stored that away in the memory bank. And then it came to fruition a couple, 3 years later when I started AYC Health and Fitness. But a lot of things happened in between that to make it come to life. But yeah, it didn't exist as an industry back then.
Right. And based on what you're saying and kind of thinking, I mean, I certainly remember the late 70s. I wouldn't have been at an age to be thinking about those type of things. But I just remember sort of the aura of LA, right? Or the coast. But I think about LA and you think about the images of, those bodybuilders on the beach and all those type of things. And so that seemed foreign, right? That's not flyover country. That's not the Midwest. That's not, that's something for the beach. That's something for right. I mean, so how are you able to get from that to the start of what would become a very, very successful business?
Yeah, well, it's interesting, and probably a lot of entrepreneurs have started the same way, in that they are in a situation that they feel is pretty good. I had what I thought was my dream job. I was managing a local workout facility in town, had contracts with the Kansas City Chiefs. We go to Arrowhead a couple times a week. We had a lot of the Chiefs players, a lot, and this will roll back the clock several years. If you remember the Kansas City Comets, the indoor soccer team way back in the day, back in the early 80s. And then some professional golfers and tennis players. I mean, we were the place where a lot of the professional athletes came to work out. And so I thought I had my dream job. Well, what happened was the facility was sold. New ownership came in and cleaned house. They got rid of everybody in the management end of it, including myself. I was managing the club, and I was devastated. I was 6 months married, and like I said, had my dream job. And all of a sudden, I go into my office one day, and there's a guy sitting at my desk, and I'm thinking, well, this doesn't look promising. And he proceeded to let me know that he was bringing his own team in and was going to let the management team go. And like I said, I was devastated, but I can vividly remember taking a deep breath, exhaling, and spending the next 45 minutes with the new owner, the guy who had just fired me, trying to help him make the transition smooth. Wow. Because I can remember thinking how close I had gotten to so many of the members in the club, and it was about them. And, in any business, it's about the person that you're trying to make a good experience for in the fitness industry, whether it be a personal training or in a gym. You want the experience to stand out from their normal part of the day. And that's what I did. And I didn't want to see that being disrupted. So, I spent the next 45 minutes with him trying to work on a game plan to transition me out and the new team in. And I didn't even know the new team, but I wanted to make sure my people that I had developed these relationships with weren't negatively affected or impacted by it. And I think that made an impression on the new ownership. And I'll tell you why. In fact, I'm sure it made an impression. So that day, it was early in the day when I was fired. And I can remember spending the rest of the day at home trying to figure in my mind, how was I going to tell my bride of 6 months that I didn't have a job? Because, we had one car, and I dropped her off at work that day, and I was going to go pick her up in the evening. And so I had all day to figure out what I was going to tell her. And when I got there to her office to pick her up, I think I just started crying because I was very emotional. I can remember, telling her I had lost my job, and she kind of looked at me and like, it's okay. This is the perfect opportunity for you to go finish your graduate work. I had 1 semester left to finish my master's degree. And she says, go back, finish your degree, and do what you've always wanted to do, start your own business. And it was like, the weight of the world that I had on my shoulders that whole day, trying to figure out what to say to my bride, my new bride of 6 months. Now we've been married 40 years, so that happened 40 years ago. But it just allowed me the freedom to say, oh, it's going to be okay. And an interesting thing happened. The next day, I called my graduate professor back in Kentucky, where I had completed my undergraduate and then started my master's degree. I called him and I said, I know this is a shot in the dark, but I've got 1 semester. I'm going to come back in. I forgot to tell you, I got fired in December. So Merry Christmas, right? So I had a month to kind of plan because the new semester was going to start in January. I called him and I said, I know it's a shot in the dark, but I'm going to come back whether I have a graduate assistantship or not. I'm going to finish my master's degree. And he said, whoa, stop right there. You're not going to believe this, but just yesterday, my graduate assistant took another position at the University of Kentucky. If you want it, the job is yours. So same day I had gotten fired, this guy took a new position at the University of Kentucky and opened up my old graduate assistantship. And without even thinking, I said, I'm taking it. I'll be there in 3 weeks.
Wow.
So yeah, it's kind of like, I'm a person of faith, so I don't believe in coincidence. I felt that was a decision that was for me. And then an interesting thing happened. The next day, after I'd gotten all my plans ready and was going to, in 3 weeks, head east to Morehead State University in Morehead, Kentucky to finish my master's degree, just 1 semester, I got a call from the guy who had fired me. And he said, Greg, I made a mistake. I would like you to come back. A lot of the members stood up on your behalf and want you to come back. And now it's like I had a dilemma. It's like, my dream job, right? And then I had already accepted the graduate assistantship back in Kentucky. And so it's like I had to think really quickly. One thing I'm a very firm believer in is not burning bridges. Mm-hmm. In fact, I wrote a chapter in a book called Bridges Are Made for Crossing, Not Burning. And so that was one of those seminal moments in my career. It's like I had a quick decision to make. What am I going to do? And so I said, well, here, I'll tell you what I'll do. I've got 5 months. I've got 1 semester to complete my graduate work. I'll come back and work for you if you'll allow me to start a business within your business. And he's like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, okay, well, there's this new thing kind of this on the West Coast and it's on the East Coast. It's called personal training. There aren't, many businesses in it, but there are a few trainers here and there. And I'd like to start a formal business within the club. And it kind of got quiet and he's like, yeah, I don't see anything wrong with that. In fact, I'll be your first client. And so the guy that had fired me 2 days earlier, all of a sudden I had a place to start a new business and I had my first client.
Wow.
It was because I think a lot of it is, when in my industry, probably in a lot of industries, there are some hotheads. And when things negatively happen to them, they react in a, kind of bad way and explosive way. And I think that was a very strong lesson for me to show that by, being professional, even in a very adverse situation, that it came back to serve me well because I went back, completed my graduate work. And in that 5-month time, I spent really the entire time building out a 5-year business plan for what would be Kansas City's original personal training center. AYC Health and Fitness, which stands for At Your Convenience. That was going to be my differentiator. And in business, you need something that differentiates you. And it was that I was going to be at my client's convenience. Morning, afternoon, evening, whatever. I'll be there at your house, at the club, wherever.
I think, Greg, to me, it's so fascinating because it's so well ahead of its time. And for anyone that is listening to this podcast that is in their 50s or 60s or 70s, this all makes sense. But, if you're younger and you're listening to this, you're saying, well, yeah, it's your convenience. Sure. I mean, that's the way it is. It wasn't always that way. It was never that way. I mean, take anything as an example, right? If you want to watch almost any channel in the world, if you pay for it, you can get anything nowadays. I mean, there was a time where you had to get up and walk up to the dial and turn it to, and then you got a cable box that you had a handful of buttons, or you hit that like that A or that B switch to go to the bottom row. I mean, and point is that everything now, you don't have to go to the grocery store. They'll deliver them for you. You don't have to go out to dinner or do that. They'll deliver it for you for a fee. Everything is at our convenience right now. Exactly. And so what I'm curious about, before we get into the entrepreneur side of the writing and the connections and all that, because we could do 20,000 hours and not cover everything that you've done, the meet people where they're at.
Yeah.
You figured something out, what now, 40 plus years ago, that was well ahead of its time. and you found clientele. And the reason why I'm really interested in this is because I think that you got to be good at what you do, obviously, but you have to be good at relationships, and then let other people tell others about those relationships, and the word of mouth spreads, and then suddenly it's, we need to be with Greg Justice. Tell me about that, because you started something that is still going today, which is remarkable.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, Joel, going stronger than ever before. I mean, we've been very fortunate, just blessed, plain and simple, throughout the years. And it kind of takes me back to one of the very first books I read, called The Ultimate Sales Machine by Chet Holmes. Great book. And there's a line in the book that says, you've got to get your first best client. And when you get that first best client, you'll be amazed at how many more best clients follow. And so that always resonated with me. And I can remember back in the early 80s, there wasn't social media. I didn't have Facebook to advertise on. Right. So what I had was my wife worked at a publishing company back then. And one of my longtime, now 40-year clients was a graphic designer. And he created a flyer for me, a brochure. I spent $40 on it and had them printed, had a new pair of tennis shoes, and I walked every street in Mission Hills, because it didn't take a rocket scientist to figure that was where the people that could afford a service like this lived. So I started in Mission Hills and went door to door selling personal training. You probably would get arrested if you tried that today, but that's all I had, a new pair of shoes and a $40 brochure. And so, one of those flyers hit, and I got a call from one of my very first clients. She actually ended up being my third client, Annette Block, who is the R of H&R Block, Richard Block. And that turned out to be my first best client, so to speak. And she told one or two of her friends, one or two of her friends told their friends. And the next thing you knew, I had to change the name of my business from At Your Convenience. And the reason I say that is because one of my clients said, "What? I can't get in at this time? You're going to have to call it At Greg's Convenience, not At Your Convenience." So, and that was when I actually did change the name from At Your Convenience to AYC, because it's like one of those problems. I don't have enough parking spaces in my parking lot for all the cars coming to my bit. Those are good problems to have.
Yeah.
And that's when I learned the power of bringing others into the business and growing the team. And it's like, wait a minute, you mean I can work fewer hours and make more money? Is that how that works? And so that was, again, a lesson in scaling a business, which, I spent 7 years in college and I never took one business class. I was an exercise science major. That's all I knew. So I was learning this entrepreneurial process as I went, and made a lot of mistakes along the way. But yeah, that's exactly like you said. You get that one best client, and then they tell the others, and then they tell their friends, and it just kept growing from there. I didn't do any marketing. I used to get all the calls for the radio stations, the TV stations, when there was a fitness thing on, because this new crazy idea. And it's funny, a legend in the broadcast business here in Kansas City, I'm trying to remember his name, it escapes me now, but he had a show on 710 AM radio, and was for years the Grand Master of the Irish parade, the St. Patty's Day parade. Yeah. It'll pop in my head. I can't think of his name now, but he was a legend in Kansas City, and he had me on his show, and he sat across the table blowing cigar in my smoke, or in my face, cigar smoke in my face, and said, he was kind of chuckling. He said, "Greg, I got to tell you, a business like this will never work in Kansas City. You're going to have to go to LA or New York. Kansas City is way too conservative for a business like this." And that was, I started the business in May, and this was August. So just a couple, 3 months into it. And those are memories back to, it's 40 years ago now, that I remember vividly and think, I wasn't mad at him for saying that, but those are memories that really fueled me to keep going and pushing it to go further.
Yeah. Well, I'd say it's worked out in ways that you could never have envisioned.
Yeah.
And when I say that, not just the business, and by the way, anyone interested, aycfit.com for the website. And on there, you will see not a one-man operation, but a very, very big operation. And yes, all of these years later, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the competition end of things. Greg is still pushing hard in and out of the gym, which is, to me, you look like a kind of guy that, I don't know how old you are, but you look like a guy that'll be doing this in your 90s or as long as you're on this earth. And some people are blessed to be wired that way. And at least in appearance and energy, you look like that to me. But again, you said college and everything like that. Those were your dreams. That was your passion. So I'm assuming that writing a book probably wasn't part of the equation. I don't know. Maybe one day, everybody always says, well, maybe one day I'll write a book. And actually, I think everybody should write a book, whether it's for their friends, their family, their client, whatever. Like, everybody has a story to tell. You didn't just write one. How did all that start? What are you at right now? What's the current count?
A little over 30, somewhere between 30 and 35, honestly. And I don't say this in any other way than I just have lost track.
Yeah.
But I write them because I'm curious, and I'll start to study a subject, and then I'll put those thoughts on paper. And because I own a publishing company, I publish them. Yeah. And so, I just find I'm curious by nature. And once I find something that I'm curious about, I dig in and learn about it.
But I think, Greg, what's fascinating to me on that is that what started as just all right, I just lost my dream job. Let's see what I can do. One door closes, another opens, the other one reopens. Suddenly an idea is hatched. And that over time turns into not just a growing business, it turns into being an expert in your field, which leads to those radio or those TV things, which leads to books, which leads to a publishing company. Again, I don't know how you could come up with these ideas or think of them because they weren't really even tangible for you at that point. My question, I guess, is at what point do you realize, I don't need to have an exact number of, it was after book 7 or it was in 1993 or whatever it was. At what point do you realize, wait a minute, this isn't just a little dabbling in some entrepreneurship or going down the entrepreneurial path to pursue what I enjoy. This is something a lot bigger. When did you realize you had something really significant on your hands?
Well, truth be told, it was when I was forced to see it through a networking group of fitness pros that I've grown up with, in the late 70s and early 80s. A whole crop of us came out of that generation together and kind of started this personal training industry that we've all been blessed to be part of for the last 40 plus years. And then new entrepreneurs came into the field, and I met a gentleman named Todd Durkin, who some of your folks may know who that is. He's a very well-known trainer in the industry, trains all the NFL guys. Drew Brees has been a client of his for 25 years. Jordan Love is a current client with the Packers now. He's just the NFL guy out in San Diego. Good, wonderful friend of mine. And he one day came to me and said, Greg, and it's funny you said after 7 books, because that's exactly when he came to me. He said, Greg, I'm curious, you've got a lot of books out there. There is something going on. You've got a process here that I want to see you help others in our industry share their stories. And I'm like, I've got a full-time job, Todd. I'm not looking for anything else. So I kind of blew it off. He came back to me a week later. He's one of those visionary guys that has a 35,000 foot view of the industry. And you need people like that around you that push you. And I've been so blessed to have that my entire career, from I don't know, some of your listeners may remember the name Lewicki. Tracy and Terry and Todd Lewicki back in the early 80s ran the Kansas City Comets, the indoor sports franchise. One of them went on to do the Minnesota Timberlakes. And I mean, they were in the sports industry, and we got to know them pretty well through the club that I managed. And he was one of the mentors that helped me early on. And so I've been blessed from the very start of my career to have people that would see things in me that perhaps I didn't see, and then encourage me to do them. Mm-hmm. And even though I might have been resistant or reluctant initially, once I'd sleep on it, I'd wake up and go, that's a good idea. I can do that. Mm-hmm. So you need people in your life that keep pushing you. And so I never want to be the smartest person in a room. And I step outside of my comfort zone to make sure I'm not. So when I go into networking groups, I want these people to push me and challenge me and make me a better person, a better business person. So Todd said, no, Greg, we've talked about it. I know you're reluctant, but you need to tell others in our industry what the process is. So I wrote out a process, started speaking all around the country about what the process of writing a book was. And then he said, now you need to start a business. You need to start your own publishing company. And so we started what was going to be the fitness publishing company, but our first client ended up not being in the fitness industry. So now it's like, okay, we can't call it the fitness publishing. So we came up with Scriptor Publishing Group, and Scriptor is the Latin word for author. So that's where that came from. Cool. And the next thing I know, we've got several wealth management companies that have come to us to write platform books, help them write platform books. All of a sudden, we were doing reality TV stars, Olympic gold, silver, bronze medalists. It's like, wait a minute, how did this happen? Yeah. And you know, then we wrote, oh yeah, we did a few fitness books too. But yeah, it just you put yourself out there, you help people, and then like the other story goes of the one best client turns into many, many more best clients. And now here we are, 6-7 years into the business. We started in 2017 and we're over 300 plus books. And again, it just happened because I was around people that challenged me, pushed me outside of my comfort zone because they saw something in me that could help others. And that's what I always want to do, is help others.
It's what it's all about. It always is. I say this in a lot of my speeches. I'll wrap up oftentimes. I'm not giving away much of an ending of the Royals' late owner, David Glass, the former CEO, billionaire CEO of Walmart. I'd hear him often say, everything you do in life is about people, whether it's business or baseball. Everything you do in life is about people. And it's a pretty good starting point, ending point, whatever you want to call it. If you could stay grounded with that, you're never going to go too far astray. I mean, it's the common bond that we all have. We're going to get into Jack LaLanne and American Ninja Warrior and all that in a moment. But before I ask my baseball themed questions, how has just the world changed? I mean, I know how the world's changed.
Yeah.
Post-pandemic, sure. Social media, sure. But now we're talking about, like from when you began this to now, you can't remain relevant without adapting to the times. And yes, to have that first best client means everything. But when they tell their people and on, eventually someone's going to say, yeah, but this is too old. This is dated. Clearly you have not done that. You've stayed up with the times, which is, I think, so important. Like, we don't have to, at whatever age we are, understand things and operate at the level of, say, Gen Z or whatever the next generation is coming in. But we can't just stay where we were in the past either. How have you maintained that relevance and stayed relevant, important, up with the times?
Well, I think one key is, as we grow, all the trainers that work here at AYC are all younger than I am, certainly. But I think one of the most things is we have adapted with technology. We have grown with the fitness industry, and have found a way not to be afraid of technology, which a lot of trainers are. They think that wearable technology is going to take over the industry. They think that AI is going to take over the industry. But I've always been one to embrace technology and use it to leverage our relationship to a deeper level with our clients, because any information is valuable information to me. So if they wear their tracker and I see that they've only gotten 3 hours of sleep one night, and we can track that easily, right? Then maybe we have to back off on the workout that was initially planned for them. So I've always told trainers, and I speak to trainers all around the world, embrace technology, go with it, use it to your advantage, and always remember that first and foremost, relationships are what will grow your business.
Well, that's a golden rule right there. No doubt about it. All right, baseball themed questions. What's the biggest? You've got a lot of them. What's the biggest home run that you've hit?
Yeah, well, I would have to say probably there have been several home runs. So I'm going to just say from when I started the publishing company, it was a big home run, because right out of the gate we got some amazing clients. And it's like, wait a minute, this doesn't just happen by accident. So I think we hit a home run with the publishing company right out of the gate. You might even call it a grand slam, because we got so many top tier athletes. And then pretty quickly after that, the Jack LaLanne book, he was my original mentor. And so I always wanted to do something that would further his legacy. And as I developed the relationship after Jack passed in 2011, I got to know the family pretty well. Elaine, Lala LaLanne, who is Jack's widow, who will turn 99 in March of 2025, has been a blessing in my life. We wrote Pride and Discipline, The Legacy of Jack LaLanne. Started writing it about 5 years ago, published it 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, I've lost track. And, the next thing you know, Mark Wahlberg's production team, a company called Unrealistic Ideas, buys the right to the Jack LaLanne story. And there's going to be a biography and a feature film with Mark Wahlberg playing Jack LaLanne.
Unbelievable.
And you talk about a home run, that may be a 5-run home run. I don't know, but so it helps me further Jack's legacy by, all the things we do. I manage all the social media for the Jack LaLanne brand. We're creating products that are coming out to leverage when the movie comes out. And you had mentioned the American Ninja Warrior show that they're doing a feature piece on me. I shot my episode a couple months ago. It'll come out in June of 2025. They're going to do a nice feature piece talking about Jack as my original mentor and all the amazing feats of strength and endurance that he did. And I'm 64. I'll be 64 this Sunday. And, he started doing feats of strength and endurance in his 40s to show that, back then 40 was considered old. And then he would do them at 45 and 50 and 55 and 60. And for his 65th birthday, he pulled 65 boats with 6,500 pounds of Louisiana timber because they sponsored the event in a lake in Tokyo. Wow. And so, I'm trying to keep up with Jack. And so for my 65th birthday, which will be a year from now, we've reached out to the production team at American Ninja Warrior. We want to do it in Las Vegas. We want to do 65 American Ninja Warrior obstacles consecutively for my 65th birthday. So, again, it's to further Jack's mission of helping people help themselves through exercise and nutrition, and to show that life just begins at 60. There are so many more things that I can see because I've had people around me that have shown me the way, starting with Jack LaLanne and showing me that anything is possible if you make it happen. And that's what I'm trying to live up to.
Love it. Love it. So good. How about a swing and a miss along the way? And what did you learn from it?
Yeah. So I've owned 6 businesses throughout my entrepreneurial life, uh, 2 of which were swings and misses. Perhaps maybe one was a foul ball. The catcher catches in them out. But one of them, I tried to assimilate another business that didn't have the same culture that AYC has. I bought the business and tried to bring the 2 worlds together, and it didn't work. And so, that cost me. It wasn't the money part that was as valuable a lesson as the culture part. It was just the cultures didn't mix. So, I should have done a little more due diligence when I bought that company and tried to assimilate them into my company. So that was probably the biggest swing and miss.
How about small ball? What are the little things that add up to big results?
Well, the little things that add up to big results are, and this goes back to my junior high, high school, college wrestling days, about embracing the grind, embracing the boredom, embracing the things that you do day after day, after week, after week, after year, and don't just embrace them, but love them. Wake up every day with it. And I do this. I wrote a chapter. It's the first chapter in one of my books. And the acronym is BEDWAS, BEDWAS. And that stands for Begin Every Day with a Smile. And I used to have to do it, consciously. Now it's so funny when you do it and do it and do it day after day after day after day, it becomes subconscious. And I wake up every morning with a smile, and people don't understand this, but it literally changes the chemistry in your brain, the chemicals in your brain with a smile.
Yeah. I totally get that. Like, I haven't thought about it that way, but I know it's relevant to the discussion. I don't know that anybody would care. Otherwise, maybe it would motivate some people. But, I'm a very impatient, don't sit still well guy, and, distracted by all the social media and everything that I tell people they shouldn't be, but I am. And I have found, it's not a big revelation, but I have found that my day is better if I start it with some type of meditation before I get on the phone, before I start going through the social media feeds, before I turn on the television, before whatever. I'll look at my phone, see, make sure the kids didn't call or something like that. And then, if I'm not feeling it, or I don't have the time, 4 or 5 minutes is better than nothing, and find a short one. Otherwise, 10 to 15 minutes. And I don't know that I'm walking around necessarily feeling better. What I know is that there was a stretch late in the baseball season where I just got lazy and stopped doing it for a month. My headspace wasn't as good. It just, and so am I physically doing the smile? Actually, sometimes the instructor will say, whoever the instructor is, now let a smile, come across your face, and it feels good. So it sounds, I don't even know if it sounds hokey, but I get the repetition piece to it, where I feel like I have to have that every day.
Yeah. And, it's one time of the day that we have complete control of. So much of our day is reactive, stimulus where you're reacting to the person that cut you off while you're driving, or, just life happens, right? Yeah. But the first thing in the morning, that's your time.
Yeah.
And you control that. And it's such a simple, like you said, it may sound kind of hokey, but it does change the chemistry in your brain.
I believe it.
It's such a simple thing to do. And so that would probably be my small ball, is that I'm just so darned consistent and disciplined with simple things like that.
The little things, the boring, the quote unquote boring things. Okay, 4 final questions. We'll run through these as we round the bases. The first, if the research is correct, you either grew up or spent time younger in Alaska, I believe. I think people that know you think of you as a Midwesterner, as a Kansas City, in which you, of course, are. How did you end up in Alaska? What's the story? What was life like growing up in Alaska?
Yeah, well, I ended up in Alaska by way of Okinawa, Japan. Of course, that's so logical, isn't it?
Right, of course.
Well, so my father was in the Air Force, and so that's all I knew growing up. And people always say, "Well, what? Having to move every 3 years of your life, that's kind kind of tough. It's like, that's all I knew. So
Mm.
I loved living in Okinawa and Colorado Springs at the Air Force Academy and in Elmendorf Air Force Base in Anchorage, Alaska, and everywhere in between. I loved it.
Very cool. Okay, second question as we round the bases. I could be all over the place with these because there's so much. I don't know anybody else that has a podcast with a 98-year-old co-host. Of course, I don't know anybody that has a name like Elaine Lalaine. Truly unique too. Tell me about that, because obviously she is the widow of a fitness legend, the godfather of fitness. Look, you're a big deal if Mark Wahlberg is going to play you in a movie. What is it like to have Elaine Lalaine at 98 years old as a podcast co-host?
Well, again, not something that I wasn't looking to do. She called me and said, Greg, I want to start a podcast. And I'm thinking, okay, I've got some connections that do podcasts. How can I help you? She said, oh, no. You're going to be my co-host. And you don't say no to Elaine Lalaine. I mean, she's like a mother to me, a second mother. And she's been a blessing in my life. So yeah, we started this podcast. And we have had some amazing guests, all the people that started the fitness industry when I came into it. And it's, again, another blessing in my life.
All right, third question. I always say I hate this kind of question, yet I continue to ask it. It's some version of what's your favorite, fill in the blank. And when you've done a lot, it's pretty impossible to do it. It's like when people say to me, what was your favorite moment of the 2015 season? Or what was your favorite? I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so many of them. Who's your favorite athlete? There's so many of them. I could come up with a top 10 list, and then there'd be another 100 to come after that. But of either like famous people or athletes or whatever, who is just like, when you think back, you're like, oh my gosh, that person was on another level. I know you've dealt with some really high level training people, but who like, when you think about what they were able to do, still blows your mind?
Without question. And that's probably the easiest question I've had is Jack LaLanne.
Okay.
Because, he didn't just start a business. He invented, he started an industry. He paved the way. Doctors used to say that lifting weights was bad for you. He had to sneak athletes into his gym in the middle of the night because coaches said, don't train weights, you'll mess up your swing.
Right.
He did the heavy lifting for us. I just came in and followed his, the trail that he blazed. And Jack LaLanne, people don't understand the impact he's had on virtually every piece of equipment that is in the modern gym today. He invented the Smith machine. It was named after his friend, Rudy Smith. He invented the leg extension, the leg curl. He invented the weight selector machine. Every machine he had his hand on in my industry. So that's an easy one. It's Jack LaLanne.
Yeah, before the Arnold Schwarzeneggers of the world, and you name any of the famous people, right? It was Jack LaLanne. I was looking too. I shouldn't say obviously. I'm old enough to have met him. I never met him, but I always knew the name of course. Was he really only 5'6"?
Yeah, he was. I'm 5'6". So he and I were eye to eye.
Wow.
Yeah, 5'6".
Okay, so that'll lead us to our final question, our walk off, and we'll speak of the 5'6" guy that I'm looking at least virtually right now. You referenced American Ninja Warrior. I think that show is so much fun, by the way. There's some people, you're one of them, that would say, boy, I'd love to be on that. There are many others, most like me, that would be like, yeah, I'll take a seat here on the couch and enjoy the competition. And that's where I'm at. But when I look back at your career, well, I'm not just looking back, we're looking forward too, of course, but I see that you've done more than 48,000 one-on-one sessions.
Let me stop you there real quick.
Yeah.
That's 100,000 now. That needs to be updated.
That's old. Oh,
yeah, that's old.
Like that's way in the past.
Yeah, that's from the website. Yeah, it's over 100,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. It just sounds even 48,000 sounded pretty impressive to me. Now it's 100,000. We've talked about evolving with the times, and you got to do stuff on YouTube, and you got to do this, and you got to do that. When you do an American Ninja Warrior, in your mid 60s, which I'm sure doesn't freak you out in any way whatsoever. This is just what you do. When you get out there, like, what's the response? I know that you're not the only one in their 60s to have ever done this, but you're typically seeing people in their 20s, 30s, maybe 40s. What do you hear from people? And what, I don't want you, obviously, you're not going to give away any bit of the episode, but like, is there anything that's tougher or more challenging for you than anything else? I mean, it looks like fun if you enjoy that kind of thing. It's fun to watch. Well, what stands out to you when you do American Ninja Warrior? What do people say, and what challenges you?
Well, physically not starting when I was little doing this, the ones that have grown up over the last 10, 15 years watching it, they started doing it as a little kid. You think about a skier who starts when their center of gravity is low and they grow up to be 6 foot tall and they ski so gracefully, where, I started when I was 60 years old doing American Ninja Warrior. So I had a learning curve. And it's funny when I see the memory videos on Facebook of when I started, and here I am now 5 years later, and I'm looking at going, man, I have incrementally year over year gotten better. And I can still see improvement over the next 5 years. So honestly, I'm just getting started in it. And the cool thing is when I got on stage, I had been up for 26 consecutive hours when I got on the stage, and I looked over and saw my family and friends on the sideline, and on the video screen, my ninja buddies that I trained with. And then Elaine came on the screen and wished me well. And I looked down the line, and first of all, the scale, when you look at those obstacles, is 3 or 4 times what you see in your workout gym. And so it was just massive. And I looked at it and I smiled. I took a deep breath, and in my head, I said, you were built for this.
Oh, that's so good.
And I just went, there were zero nerves because all the hard work had been done. All the training, it was like, now we play. Now
all the boring stuff was done. Now you get to enjoy it.
Yeah. And so, that was really cool. And I was able to take a lot of the lessons in, because during that 26 hours of being awake before I got on stage, in the athletes waiting area, it's not real comfortable. It's a tent. You're on you're in the desert, first of all, in Las Vegas, very uncomfortable. And I caught myself a couple times going, oh man, this isn't what I signed up for. But I was able to take lessons that I taught my athletes about the mindset. And I was able to snap it, get it out of my head and say, remember why you're here. And it just turned it around like that. And like I said, 26 hours awake, got on that stage, and I was ready to go.
And I'll bet all those other competitors, so much respect, I would assume, for you.
Well, and I for them, I mean, I have respect for what they're able to do. So I'm hoping just to inspire people to understand that when you're 60, you're not old. It truly can be just the beginning. And that's why I mentioned earlier that I'm writing another book. We had just started the project with Tony Horton. Some of you will remember him from P90X fame. Yeah. And he's 2 years older than I am. So he's 66. And we're writing a book called Vitality 60 Plus. Truly about how to get in shape, stay in shape to make 60, 70, 80, 90 and beyond the best years of your life.
You could send that one to me for a birthday gift in 8 years.
I promise.
I'm not there yet, but slowly but surely I am inching my way closer to it. And you know what? Life in the 50s is pretty good. And
it is.
It certainly sounds like life in the 60s will be even better. And so this is so much fun. I want to, again, encourage everybody to learn a little bit more. And there's so much to learn. You can go to aycfit.com, aycfit.com, and within there, or go on to anywhere and just Google Greg Justice, books, author, and there is a plethora, 30 plus, too many to count, with more coming as well. We will look forward to that movie next year. We will look forward to the American Ninja Warrior appearance next year. And I can't wait to watch you out there competing. Greg, thank you so much for sharing your story, your perspective, your inspiration, and so much more. It's been a real pleasure.
Joel, it was my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
It's around the bases. Everybody knows Joe Goldberg.